Hello, welcome to my Unit 9 presentation on perspectives in psychology. In psychology, there are 5 main perspectives, which is behaviourism, cognitive psychology, psychoanalysis, psychodynamic, biological psychology, social psychology. Cognitive psychology is your knowledge and how you remember things, also how you perceive things. It also plays a role in problem solving and how you choose to act. It can also affect your attention by telling our brain we cannot focus on more things at once, for example watching TV whilst being on your phone. Cognitive psychology has 2 parts: bottom-up processing, which is how your brain collects information from your surroundings and translates the information throughout your brain. The other one is top-down processing, which uses your knowledge and life experiences with your surroundings. Social psychology is when you adjust your behaviours to people around you. For example, social influence, you go out for a drink and people are telling you to drink and everyone around you is drinking. You then drink more, but it can be seen as peer pressure, as you don't want the fear of missing out. Evaluations and assumptions within psychology. Cognitive psychologists believe that your behaviour and your actions are fueled by your mental process by watching situations. Your mental thinking process also increases your memory, reasoning with things, and your language. This can all affect the way you act and behave towards others. Cognitive psychology assumptions. Your internal processing can be observed rather than using normal logic. Your brain processes things like a laptop/computer by inputting and outputting data, storing information and gathering information and figuring out what to do with said information. Limitations in cognitive psychology. The risk of dismissing certain emotions and feelings which may affect the way you act and behave. An example of this was the study of Yerkes and Dodson in 1908, which they found that anxiety does have an impact on your memory and how you remember past events. Other limitations include studies are done within a simulated environment, not in a real world setting. People who have been diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder are overlooked. The strengths in cognitive psychology are with the advancing of technology, e.g. MRI scans, we are able to produce strong results and can duplicate them if needed. There's also loads of different therapies available now, such as CBT, which can help the treatment of mental illnesses such as depression. Social psychology. This is based on yourself and how you act with your surroundings and other people around you. This can affect your emotional state. Social psychology assumptions are individuals who are in your surroundings can have an impact on your behaviour and the way you think. All of your behaviours happen whilst in a social setting, and your relationships can impact the way you think and behave. The limitations to social psychology are, again, they are done in a simulated environment, so you don't get the real world kind of view. The researchers throughout the studies could use prompts which throws people off, so they feel like they're acting wrongly, so they alter their behaviour. The strengths, however, are it can improve social problems such as discrimination as people copy. So if someone is actively trying to get rid of discrimination, then it's a domino effect in a good way. You can also study different cultures and backgrounds to get an idea on where cultural differences happen and how they might be prevented. The key theorists in behaviourism, I'm going to talk about Watson and Weiner with little Albert. Watson was a psychologist who was interested to see if your emotions, e.g. fear, was learned or inherited. So they decided to get a 9-month child called Albert and we'll show him loads of different objects and watch his response. Albert saw a white rat and it triggered a response of petting and stroking, which was the strongest response within all of the other objects. So Watson had to come up with a stimuli, which was a metal rod and a hammer. So every time Albert would be shown this white rat, he would be behind Albert making a loud noise, which would terrify Albert, obviously. They did this numerous times and then removed the stimuli to see if the white rat would trigger a response, which it did. Albert still did the same response as if Watson was behind him. However, there are criticisms to this study due to Albert's age. Subjecting him to fear and distress is unethical. He couldn't consent, and also with the sample size was too small as it was only done on Albert. Jean Paget's theory of cognitive psychology. Jean believed there was 4 stages within a child's development. Stage 1 was sensomotor stage, which ranges from birth to 2 years. This is when infants explore the world by their sight, touch, taste, all of their senses, and start to become familiar with their surroundings. The second stage was the pre-optional stage, which is 2 to 7 years. This is when they start to discover speech and start to engage in imaginative play, such as doctors and nurses, but are still trying to understand people around them. The third stage is concrete operational stage, which ranges from 7 till 11. This is when children start to think more logically about surroundings and what tasks they have to do and complete. This is also when they start to understand conservation. So you have a tall glass you have 2 glasses, one tall, one kind of wide, and they've got the same quantity, however they look the same. It's learning that it is the same and how shapes do change the quantity, well, what looks like the quantity size, but it does not. The 4th stage is formal operational stage, which is 11 years to adulthood. This is when you start to think deeper, start thinking more hypothetical things and situations, and you start to understand your surroundings and how to adapt to it better. The limitations of this study, however, the sample size was his own children and his colleagues' children, so lacked diversity. The strengths was he was the first psychologist to study this, and it impacted the educational system. Sigmund Freud's theory of the unconscious mind. Sigmund Freud suggested that the mind is split into 3 parts. That being the conscious, which is the small amount of brain activity that you are actively aware of, e.g. your thoughts and how you see things. The preconscious is what you've experienced and what you've learned throughout your life, and the unconscious is also known as the subconscious. This is where your fears and trauma, what you may have experienced, will be stored. That's why sometimes we don't remember it, because it's just stored at the back of our head. The strengths of this study are it impacted therapy techniques by moving things from your unconscious mind to your conscious mind. It helped aid psychologists understand what's happening within someone's brain and help them uncover their trauma and coping mechanisms. The limitations are that it is quite hard to prove, and he kind of lacked focusing on biological and social influences. Blocher and Wernicke, 1874. This is a localization of functions theory. This is a study where they believe that different parts of your brain are responsible for your other mental functions and your behaviours, with the left and right hemisphere being your two main parts of your brain. The left hemisphere is where the Broca's area is located, which is responsible for your speech and language production and how fast and advanced you learn it. However, there has been proof of if this area is damaged, it can affect your speech, e.g. speaking slower. The Wernicke area, which is also in the left hemisphere, located in the left temporal lobe. This is responsible for aiding your language and understanding the language, both written and spoken. It's been proven that if this area is damaged, that your sentences aren't really connected together, you don't really make sense to others. The strengths of this study was due to being able to do brain scans. You can see what area of the brain is lit up and when, and where the damage is, helping prove that things are localized into one area of the brain. The limitations is your speech and language being localized into one section is a little bit too easy, as it uses all your brain. Tafel and Turner's social identity theory, 1979. Social categorization. This is when you class yourself within a group based on characteristics you may have, e.g. age, gender, religion, race, anything really. Social identification is where you adapt to your group you have chosen to be in by changing your behaviours and your values. Social comparison is when you compare yourself to other groups, which can cause rivalries sometimes, and can lead to quite big conflicts. In-groups and out-groups. Your in-group is your group that you belong to and who you identify as, and the out-groups are other groups what you do not identify as. Positive distinctiveness is when you try to make your group look more positive than other groups. The strengths of this theory is it had an impact on it influenced people to stop stereotyping and figuring out what, like, we're all people pretty much. The limitations, however, did overlook someone's personality and life experiences, as social interactions can affect the way you identify. Similarities and differences between perspectives in psychology. Nature versus nurture. This looks at your biology and your surroundings that you were raised in. Determinism versus free will. This is how your behaviour is managed both internally and externally, and being able to have free choices. Reductism and holism looks at how your behaviour is step by step with your thinking process, and also how factors within a situation can affect your behaviours. Research methods, there's two types of this. There's empirical research, which is done in a lab setting, also known as artificial setting, which is done with scientific methods, and non-empirical research, which is observations. We're going to look at the differences between cognitive psychologists and biological psychologists. The similarities with nature and nurture is that they both believe nurture has a role to play in an individual's behaviour. However, cognitive psychologists believe in both and that they both impact behaviour, whereas biological psychologists focus more on nature, which is your genes, nervous system and brain, and how that impacts your behaviour. Determinism versus free will. Cognitive psychologists believe that they are linked to an extent. However, cognitive psychologists believe that your thinking process can be foreseen, whereas biological psychologists believe that your behaviours are based on your genetics. The differences between determinism versus free will are: cognitive psychologists are soft determinists, which means they focus both on internal and external factors, and biological psychologists are hard determinists, which believes that your genes affect your behaviour. Both research methods are empirical research, which is lab-based. However, Paget's study was non-empirical as it was observation. Contemporary issues, mental health and well-being. Psychodynamic perspective. Psychodynamic therapy is a speaking therapy during your sessions you are given tools and resources to understand your feelings and how they can impact your behaviour. The strengths of this is it focuses on a whole and multiple parts of your brain and helps you understand why your trauma experiences can affect your behaviour. It can also have a long-term effect on you as you become more aware of your emotions. The limitations are it's not fit for all mental health issues. It can also affect you in the long run by uncovering this trauma you might not know that you had. It can also be very time consuming, sometimes over 50 sessions, and can be quite expensive. Contemporary issues within diversity and inclusion. Behaviorism, observational learning. This is when psychologists believe that when we are observing individuals, it can reduce issues like discrimination. This can be seen in places like a workplace or a school. The strengths are by having a leader or role model like type who actively promotes and practices inclusion, such as a manager, senior teacher, or older people can have a positive outcome as it encourages people to follow in their footsteps and behaviours and take a step back and think, hold on, this is not correct. The limitations, however, are we are only human and we can be swayed quite easily, so their views might change from, let's say, something on the news, something in an article, or just a bad experience. So unfortunately the news it doesn't really show the positives most of the time, so we get influence in that way. And they are my references, and thank you for listening.